What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Credit Lake, and today we're going to be reading Chapter 6 of A Lesson in Practicality by ResidentAnchor on Wattpad. If you'd like to support the author or the fanfic itself, do so in the description below with the links that I left for those. Now, time for Chapter 6, Pieces Fall in Place. Things had been picked up for everyone, and group nights became far less frequent. The apartment even started to become a bit of a mess as things started piling up. Despite the increase of overall stress, everyone seemed to be taking everything in stride. Logan had even convinced Patton to only clean on his day. Such was today, an early morning, and Patton was cleaning, as well as cooking and picking up the entire apartment. He had left 2 copies out to help him get as much done before work, since it was his day to clean. Logan was the first up after him. As usual, he was immediately handed a cup of coffee and directed to the table. "I know you have to go to work soon, so just sit. I have lunch ready." "Thank you, Patton." "Oh, we have names. I'm Pat too." Logan looked up at the one who handed him his coffee. "Patton is cleaning up the apartment. Pat 3 is the one wiping everything down." The Patton he had been talking to, Pat 2, he had been told, turned back to the stove and continued cooking. "I'm making French toast. I can make some regular toast for you. We still have that strawberry stuff you like." "That would be wonderful, Patton. Sorry. Pat 2? He looked over and got a nod of approval. "There a reason for the name changes?" Pat 2 headed to the fridge and pulled out a small jar. "Well, we were trying to think of a way to differentiate ourselves. Whenever Pat 1 makes a copy, I'm the first one to come out. The one he makes after that is Pat 3. Logan put down his coffee and inspected the copy. "So, you're always the same versions the Patton creates?" "Yep." He pushed the lever down on the toaster. "I was the one who made dinner last week while Pat 1 helped you with that problem." Logan thought back to last week. He called Patton to help figure out how to interact with one customer that always comes in and wants to talk, but he was no good with people. "I'm usually the one that helps with the cooking. Pat 3 likes cleaning, though." "You have different interests you prefer?" He blew on his coffee and took another sip. "Fascinating." "Yeah, we were trying to come up with a better name, but that works, and we all like this name Patton, so we compromised." He put a plate in front of Logan with a slice of French toast. "Though I wanted to be called Clifford, like the big dog." Then Pat 3 got upset because he wanted a new name as well. Things started to get confusing. The toaster popped up as Pat 2 walked over and set it on a plate. "You should talk to Pat 4. He's never usually out, but sometimes we all sit there and talk when we start feeling lonely. He hasn't met anyone yet. He's the shyer one, I guess." He turned around and placed the toast on the table. "You have a look on your face, Lo. That one you get when you're piecing things together? I can tell." Logan looked up at the copy. "Your back was to me. How can you tell?" "I think we know you well enough." Another Patton walked into the kitchen. "It's almost like we can hear your brain working sometimes." "Patton?" "Yes?" A third poked their head in as they all answered in unison. "Well," the last Patton fully walked into the kitchen. "Are there 3 people in here, or is it just me?" "Clever. Very amusing, Patton." Logan grumbled to himself. The other 2 gave a high five to each other before turning to the original and disappearing in a flash. "Thanks, Logan. Got the place mostly cleaned up, just in time for breakfast." He took a seat at the table. "Good morning. Isn't it a beautiful day?" Roman casually strode into the kitchen. "It's overcast and likely to rain this afternoon." Roman huffed and walked past. "Every day can be a beautiful day." Patton let out an "Aw" and smiled up at Roman. That was so cute! He glanced down the hall towards the only closed door. We haven't had a family night in a while. Still not a family, Logan muttered. Oh, come on now, Logan. We might not be related, but this year, something brought us together, be it fate or destiny. Or an advertisement, Logan mumbled and took a bite of his toast. You love us. Shut up. Patton smiled. A few hours later, and the apartment was silent. Patton is the only one there still awake. He kept glancing down the hall with worry. He was distracting himself with anything he could, including one of Logan's books. Eventually, he heard a creak of the old bedroom door and held himself back from running and checking up on Virgil, casually walking into the kitchen. Well, good morning. Sleep okay? Virgil grunted in response and headed for the coffee pot. Patton looked up at the clock and saw it was nearly noon. Coffee this late? You usually avoid caffeine. I didn't sleep well. Virgil poured a cup of the cold coffee and stuck it in the microwave, ending the conversation there. Patton looked on in worry and approached the other. If you want to talk about anything, don't. Virgil took out the steaming mug and leaned against the counter. Look, you are the most understanding and caring person on this planet, Patton. You're great. But Virgil blew on his coffee a bit. A few restless nights isn't out of the ordinary for me. I'll be fine. He sipped from the mug and pulled back, looking up at Patton, who looked back lost. He sighed and put the mug down. Look, you've been helping. You all have. This is something I can handle alone. Okay? Patton nodded and placed a hand on Virgil's shoulder. Just know that you don't ever have to handle it alone. We're here for you. Virgil smiled softly before catching himself and attempted to rub it off his face. Yeah, whatever. He glanced over and saw Patton smile back knowingly. Thanks, Patton. Aw, come here. Virgil was pulled into a hug and lightly pushed back in protest. Patton let go and smiled. You try and relax today if you can, okay? Sure, whatever you say, Pat. Virgil decided a little detour on his way home from work was more than deserved. He stopped by a bookstore to see if anything new jumped out at him. Sometimes getting lost in the pages of a story helped him calm down at night enough to try to fall asleep. The old store he used to frequent was across town, closer to where he used to live, but a quick search showed one of the few blocks from where he was working. He walked over and ducked into the store, trying not to make eye contact as he paced the shelves. He was walking past a section of poetry when he stopped and grabbed one of the shelf off out of curiosity. Old cringeworthy memories of his high school days where he wrote sonnets and poetry crept back as he flipped through the pages. An interesting choice, one I'm mildly surprised about. Virgil jumped and slammed the book shut, looking up and meeting the eyes of Logan. Although I am rather intrigued if you wish to discuss this topic with me. Don't sneak up on me like that. Virgil shoved the book back in its place and on the shelf. What are you doing here? Working. I thought that was obvious. Virgil finally noticed the small stack of books Logan seemed to be carrying. I didn't know this is the bookstore you worked at. Virgil shrugged and started to walk away. There is no need to leave simply because of that discovery. Virgil stopped, but he didn't turn around. I can help you look for anything if that is of benefit. Is there something that you were looking for? Virgil finally turned around and looked at Logan. They had been more civil since the small spat over Logan's journal, but never quite got back to the level of comfort that they had before. Not for a lack of Logan trying in his small ways like this. Anything you suggest? That depends on the genre you're looking for. I know a good few mystery novels, but if you prefer something like romance or fiction, I can give you recommendations. Virgil spun back around and crossed his arms. Do I look like a romance kind of guy? I am not one to judge if that is what you enjoy. Virgil scoffed and didn't hide a smirk that grew on his face. Romance novels are for saps and idiots like Roman who don't know how to get out of their heads about how delusional all those fake romances are. Logan chuckled and shook his head. While I see your points, I would have to counter-argue on Roman's behalf. I do not personally enjoy romance, but it's the point to get swept up in something you don't understand yourself. I'm sure we could spend some time debating about this. Maybe we should. I don't mind. If Logan wasn't shocked, he hit it well. Virgil had extended an olive branch after their silence and didn't have to wait long for a nod in approval. That sounds quite satisfactory. He smirked and shuffled the books in his arms. I have to get going. Let me know if you need help, Virgil. After the unexpected meeting, Virgil was tired from being out and social and just wanted to go home. He wandered the store a bit before asking Logan the best bus route home and headed out quietly. He tried sneaking into the apartment but was met with the loud, boisterous voice of Roman surrendering himself in the living room. Ah, Virgil, nice to see you made it home in one piece. Do you have to be so loud all the time? Roman went and turned off the music coming from his phone. Someone doesn't know how to relax at the end of a long day. Virgil rolled his eyes in response. If you'd like, I could give a few ideas to help. What makes you think I need any ideas? Patton may have accidentally let it slip you haven't been sleeping. It is my duty as this city's newest resident hero to help all of its citizens, no matter the issue. Roman put a foot on the coffee table and stood tall and proud. Besides, it may help those around you not to worry as much. He put his foot back on the ground. By that, I mean Patton, of course. Logan seems a bit worried as well. Right, of course. No one else who lives here is worried. Virgil winked and headed down the hall to his room. Well, if someone else was, they might want to give some suggestions. You seem to like the quiet. Maybe one night of rest in the tub would help you relax before bed. Virgil stood in the doorway and raised an eyebrow quizzically. Not that you're suggesting, though, right? Me? Pish-posh. No, of course not. Right. Thanks for nothing, I guess. I'll have to take that suggestion you totally didn't give me into consideration. Roman turned his music back on and lowered it, walking into his room to continue singing, but keeping it a bit more quiet now that he wasn't alone. After a few songs, he ventured down the hall to the bathroom to look for his brush that he surely had left there in the morning, humming quietly to himself. Do you mind, Princey? Roman jumped and spun around, his eyes trailing down, and saw Virgil sitting in the tub. The curtain was drawn back, and he was still completely clothed. Can't relax with you interrupting me. Roman glared down at Virgil. The grin on his face made Roman aware that Virgil knew exactly what he was doing. You left the door wide open. Also, that works better with, I don't know, water in it. Oh, does it? Virgil slid down a bit and put his feet up on the other end of the tub. That explains a lot, because I just don't get it. This is not comfortable at all. Roman turned around and grabbed what he came in for. I'll be more specific then. Warm water would help a great deal. You can even use my bubble bath. You're welcome. He walked out of the bathroom and pulled the door closed behind him, cutting off the laughter he heard from the other side. It wasn't much later that Roman started heating up leftovers, since it was just him and the dreary roommate brooding in the bathroom. He heard the door creak open and waited a few minutes before venturing down the hall. He hadn't heard Virgil's door click shut, so he walked to the bathroom and peered inside and opened the door. Closer, he could hear soft music coming from the other side and gave it a knock. Virgie, I'm heating up leftovers for dinner since it's just us. Can't hear you. Come in. Roman walked in and cautiously peered around the corner. Yeah, of course you didn't. He covered his face with his hand. This isn't any better, you know. Virgil's grin was bigger than the last time. I added water, what's the big deal? Usually baths are taken without clothes. Oh, dreary one. Roman, are you trying to get me undressed? How scandalous. Virgil wiggled his eyebrows up at him. Roman removed his hand and looked down at Virgil, who was still completely clothed, including a hoodie. You even used my bubble bath, a complete waste of you. Roman turned and walked on the bathroom. Why do I bother? Once out of sight, he smiled and laughed quietly to himself. The next morning, Virgil woke up a bit earlier than he had previously and even was able to manage without the coffee. He had to admit, messing with Roman had cheered him up a bit, and he still had trouble sleeping, but not as much as before. The nightmare he had been having didn't return last night, and he was able to catch up on a bit of sleep. Virgil was sat on the counter with a bowl of cereal when Logan walked in. Ah, Virgil, I see you're not using chairs again. Glad to see you're in a better mood. What can I say? I like to have a different perspective on things. I am sure. Logan adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit of his at times. Speaking of perspective, I was wondering if I could get a recommendation from you. Virgil perked up, but didn't stop eating. We talked about books yesterday, but I was hoping you might have some reading material that might be more directed towards something we could relate to. Virgil swallowed his cereal and stared at Logan for a minute. Are you asking for comic book suggestions? A smirk bloomed across his face. Logan, I'm not surprised at you. Didn't take you for that type of nerd. I merely wish to see how nonsensical the world sees people such as ourselves. It may give me a different look on things. You won't read much more than whatever comes out of Roman's mouth. It's all about destiny and fate and doing things for the greater good, or it's dark and brooding and moral grayness. Logan made a noise of disgust. I do not like it when people simply use fate as an excuse for their actions. At least Roman does it to try to bring about some good. Oh? Virgil hopped off the counter. I mean, I don't believe in destiny. The universe isn't going to decide what I should do for me. That's just stupid. Why do you hate it? Much for the same reasons. No outside force decided this is where we are all in our lives. We each made our own decisions which led us here. There are an infinite amount of variables that lead to us in this exact moment. Take your power, for example. Logan motioned towards the other, and Virgil slid his bowl into the sink, leaning it against the counter and giving him his full attention. You realize the dangers of what you can do and are always cautious. If Roman had been given this power you possess, we would not be here. That was not destiny. That was not the actions you chose based off of your abilities, molded by past experiences and your own moral sense of right and wrong. Virgil stared down at Logan and crossed his arms. Yeah, very good point. Roman could be jumping through time and messing with who knows what. Same with Patton. I think the abilities we gained helped us realize who we are, but that was probably some genetic mutation lottery or some biochemical marvel we had no control over. However, the absence of complete control in a certain situation does not mean we should throw everything we don't have control over to some falsy we call destiny. This time, Logan was met with silence. He looked up at Virgil and met his eyes. Virgil pushed off of the counter and walked up to the other, almost glaring him down. I have one question for you, Logan. A simple yes or no. But be completely honest with me. Well, I can answer to the best of my abilities, I suppose. This has been bugging me, almost from the day we moved in. Virgil got face to face with Logan. Do you know how we all ended up in the same apartment? Logan went to open his mouth and Virgil held up a hand and stopped him. I don't want some stupid cop-out answer like, yes, we all happen to apply to the same place, bull you've pulled before. I want the truth. Virgil leaned back the slightest amount. It wasn't destiny or fate, and I don't believe in coincidences. Just yes or no. Do you know how it happened? Logan bit back a response, and the immediate silence was enough of an answer. Virgil spun around and began to pace, pulling at his hair. Virgil, there is a very reasonable explanation for... You freaking knew! Virgil's pacing never slowed. This whole time, all these months, and you let Roman spout about fate, and you knew. What's going on here? Patton walked in, rubbing his eyes and adjusting his glasses. I heard shouting. Damn right you did. Virgil spun around and glared down at Logan. Care to explain? It's a misunderstanding, I assure you. Logan looked up at Patton, growing concerned. It's also not quite that simple. Of course not, Virgil shouted louder. That's the perfect answer, isn't it? Sounds like you've already read every comic on how not to do things in this very situation. Roman groaned in protest and walked in. I was trying to catch up on some beauty rest. This face takes work. Why the yelling? I'm not quite sure either. Patton never looked away from Logan. Virgil knew his hands were in the air in frustration. No, because Logan here never bothered to tell anyone he knew. How about you share with the class? Patton walked up and placed a hand on Virgil's shoulder in an attempt to comfort him, and it was immediately shoved away. Virgil, maybe we should calm down and talk about whatever this is together. Yeah, I'm sure whatever the nerd hasn't mentioned to us. Roman was cut off by the light flickering. He looked up and saw the hanging lights swinging from side to side. Tell them, Logan. It wasn't destiny or fate that brought us together, and you knew this whole time. Virgil practically spat the words out. Tell me, I'm right about my assumption, aren't I? You can read our thoughts. Am I right? Logan stared down at the floor and stayed silent. His eyes tried to light up, but he blinked it away every time. Small things around the room started to shift slightly in their spots as he fought for control. I didn't. Logan muttered out softly. I promised I never would. Perhaps you're being too hard on him. Roman started to look skeptical, but put his hands up in reassurance. Yeah, it's bad he knew and didn't tell us, but I'm sure it's not so terrible that you need to shout at him like this. Surely. Logan completely tensed up and shook his head, closing his eyes. Oh, Lo. Patton let out a sigh. He put his hand on his chest and rubbed it, staring down at the other. Virgil spun around to the other two. He always said he would never use his powers on us, but he said that after we moved in. Virgil spun back around. You made us all find the place, didn't you? You're the reason we all decided to move in with you. You can get in our heads. Who says you can't do more when you're there? That's enough, Roman pushed by Patton and grabbed Virgil's arms. All these blameless accusations, and you're upsetting him. Let's just talk about this. He's right. All eyes were on Logan, who looked up, not bothering to blink away his lights in his eyes. The light finally stopped swinging and froze in its place. Papers and silverware that sat in the sink had begun to lift into the air. I found you all, and I planted the idea to move out into your heads. I can't make you do anything you don't want to do, but I gave you the idea, pushed you in the right direction, made you all find this place. He shut his eyes tight. I never told you. Roman let go of Virgil and stared shockingly at Logan. You? All this time? Logan nodded and stayed silent. Virgil suddenly stormed out of the room, the apartment door slamming shut soon after. No one bothered to chase him. Patton was the first to move, sliding by Roman and holding up his hands in surrender. Okay, Lo, take a deep breath. Can you do that? Logan opened his eyes and took a step back. No, it's okay. Patton reached forward. I felt it all. The regret, the hurt, everything. I'm willing to hear you out. You need to calm down first. Logan bit his lip and let his breath out in a big shudder. He took in another, much more shallow one, and let it loose. The objects that had under his control slowly started to fall back into their places, and the light shook a bit more after being let go. Roman stepped out of the way as Patton ushered Logan into the living room and onto the couch. He kept his distance and thought on the discovery that had just been made. Logan was back to his usual calm self, but he looked so tired and didn't bother trying to hide his expression off his face. Roman took a step forwards, the couch, and grabbed the attention of both of them. You mind explaining? Logan brought his hands together and leaned forward. It's a long story, one I wish Virgil was... He cut himself off and took a breath. I won't go into details just yet. However, you both deserve an answer after these past few months. Why then? Why? Patton rubbed Logan's back slowly. He was lonely, Patton muttered, causing Logan to tense up. I felt it the second Virgil started talking. It took me a minute to realize what it was. You suddenly felt like you were alone. Logan nodded silently and looked up at Patton. So you found us and brought us together so we can all be alone together. Patton smiled a bit. Can't say I approve of how you went about it, but I do understand. How did you find us? Roman sat down in the chair Logan usually sat at. Well, I have an old hobby I used to do before we met. Logan looked up at Patton. I would people watch and try to guess how they lived. If I found someone interesting enough, a quick scan of their mind would let me know how I did. Patton held his gaze and sat up when it sank in. Wait, me? Logan nodded and a quick smile appeared on his face before disappearing completely. We met before? Logan shook his head and looked back down. No, it was at some small cafe and I was tucked away in a corner. However, I was able to see you duplicating yourself just that morning. I decided to dig deeper and found the basic chemical makeup of your brain was very slightly altered. After I knew what I was looking for, I spent a lot of time scanning the whole city to see if we were alone. Obviously, we were not. Roman sat back down and crossed his arms. So what, you found some place for all of us to live and gave us all the idea to move in? Logan chuckled to himself. No, I thought about approaching all of you once that time had come, explaining what might be a better option. However, my first attempt did not go over as planned. What happened? Patton asked. None of us remember meeting you before we moved in. Can you erase memories? Roman leaned in a bit. Did you erase one of our memories? Logan shook his head and finally leaned back on the couch. Yes, I can, but that's not... This is why I wanted Virgil to be here. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I don't remember what happened. He placed them back on his face. Patton's hand froze and he looked over at Roman. They exchanged a shocked look before turning back to Logan. You don't remember? Patton muttered. That's why you always had that journal you wrote everything in. I think there's a fifth person in the city, and they erased my entire memory of our meeting. Logan finally turned and looked up at Patton. I remember clearly going to meet up with someone, and I know none of you can alter memories. I was afraid to find them and try again, so I left them out and came up with a plan B. Moving us all in together and letting us find out naturally. Roman sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Still not the best way, but now knowing. Roman stood up. So now we have to find out who this stranger is and why they erased your memory in the first place. I don't know, Roman. It doesn't sound very safe. Patton looked up and Roman who smirked back in response. Nonsense, I'm a hero. Well, trying to be one at least. Protect us and we'll just go back with Logan. Roman motioned towards the telepath. He can read his mind to make sure they don't try anything, and Virgil can... Roman froze. Oh, I suppose finding Virgil would be priority numero uno. Give him some time. He was pretty upset. Patton glanced back at the floor. Maybe he will come back. If he doesn't, we send out the search party tonight and make sure he's safe. Perhaps it is best if I stay here. Logan stood up from the spot. I can tell you if he comes back while you're out. I doubt he will return to me in any way. Roman gasped with joy. Can you send us messages telepathically? No, Roman. It's called a cellular device. Roman's shoulder dropped as he frowned. I can't tell you or make you do anything. It's just a matter of planting thoughts and ideas, and even then I don't do it very often, if at all. I haven't done it since meeting all of you. Logan tensed up a bit. I was hoping to avoid this very situation. Virgil will come back, Logan. Patton smiled at him and Logan looked away. Don't worry, I'm sure he's okay. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Please support the author, and with that, do your best.